It's not every day you find yourself at gunpoint over a banana bread delivery. But that's exactly where I was, standing in the middle of Maplewood Circle, badge clipped to my belt, sun glaring off my sheriff's star, and a woman named Karen Whitmore screaming into a megaphone from the top of a golf cart. "Citizens arrest! Hands in the air right now!" she hollered, her voice crackling through the cheap speaker, drawing a crowd of confused neighbors clutching their coffee mugs and HOA pamphlets like shields. The part that still tickles me, even now, is that she thought she could arrest me. Me. The sheriff of the whole damn county. And it wasn't just her. Oh no, Karen had gathered a full tactical unit, a handful of retirees with homemade armbands and a dog in a baby stroller. It was the most aggressively suburban rebellion you've ever seen. 2 hours earlier, everything had been fine. The sky was clear, the grass freshly mowed, and I had exactly one goal for my Sunday morning: deliver a batch of my mom's banana bread to Deputy Sam Torres before it got cold. I was halfway across the park when I spotted her, Karen, clipboard in one hand, walkie-talkie in the other, her stride sharp enough to cut glass. I should have turned around. I should have taken the alley behind the pool. But no, I was feeling cocky. Figured I'd get a few neighborly nods, maybe even a wave or two. Instead, Karen zeroed in on me like a heat-seeking missile, squinting at my sidearm as if she'd never seen a holstered weapon before. "Excuse me, sir," she barked, stepping right into my path. "You're violating HOA regulations regarding open carry on private property." I gave her a polite smile. "Morning, Karen. Sheriff Rick Dalton, County Sheriff's Office. Just passing through." I tapped the badge for good measure. It caught the sunlight like a mirror, almost blinding her. Karen blinked hard, took a step back, and then, God help me, doubled down. "Badge or no badge, you're still subject to Maplewood HOA Bylaw 12b4, subsection F. No open carrying of firearms within common areas unless explicitly permitted by HOA's security detail." She rattled it off from memory, her chest puffed up with pride. I waited a beat, trying to process if she was serious. She was. Deadly serious. Before I could correct her, Karen whipped out her walkie-talkie and barked. "Code red, all units, code red. We have an armed trespasser in the playground zone. Mobilize!" I swear to God, the words had barely left her mouth when 4 more residents emerged from behind trees, bushes, and a suspiciously tall hedgerow. One guy was carrying a pool noodle like a sword. Another wore a homemade flak vest fashioned out of old yoga mats. And then there was old Mrs. Cranston, 82 years old and mean as a hornet, driving a golf cart straight at me like a battering ram. Sam, bless his heart, chose that moment to text me. "Bro, Karen's on the warpath. Hide your badge. Hide your wife." Too late. I typed back. "Send backup. Maybe artillery." Mrs. Cranston skidded the golf cart to a halt inches from my shins. Karen climbed on top like she was leading the Normandy invasion. "Place your weapon on the ground and surrender peacefully," she shouted into the megaphone, sending feedback screeching through the air. I couldn't help it. I laughed. I tried to smother it with a cough, but the damage was done. Karen's eyes narrowed to slits. "Noncompliance will be noted in the incident report," she barked, flipping her clipboard dramatically. The crowd of HOA enforcers closed in, forming a very intimidating semicircle around me, if you find a semicircle of pensioners intimidating. I thought about explaining jurisdiction, about how county law superseded HOA bylaws, about how I literally had the authority to arrest them for obstruction if I wanted to. But then I looked at Karen, sweaty from her crusade, genuinely believing she was protecting her community from a rogue sheriff, and I realized nothing I said would matter. Karen didn't want logic. Karen wanted battle. I slowly, very slowly, unclipped the lockbox from my belt and set it gently on the sidewalk. Karen's eyes lit up like a slot machine hitting the jackpot. She jabbed a finger at it. "What's in the box?" she demanded. "Contraband? Unregistered firearms? Counterfeit HOA permits?" I raised an eyebrow. "Banana bread," I said flatly. Dead silence. A bird chirped. Somewhere, a dog barked. Karen blinked, then rallied. That's what they all say, she snapped. She signaled two of her cronies forward, Mr. Donnelly and his twin grandsons, to secure the package. I crossed my arms, watching this absurd parade unfold, when a familiar black sedan pulled up to the curb. Mayor Cynthia Lane stepped out, high heels clicking, sunglasses sliding down her nose. She took one look at the standoff, the golf cart militia, the banana bread box being treated like a live explosive, and sighed deeply. Rick, she called. Are you being arrested by the HOA again? I shrugged. Apparently I'm an armed insurgent this time. Karen rushed up to her, practically vibrating with righteous fury. Mayor Lane! As HOA chief enforcer, I'm conducting a citizen's arrest on an unidentified armed male trespassing on HOA-controlled property. Cynthia glanced at me, then at Karen, then back at the banana bread. You're trying to arrest the sheriff over baked goods, she deadpanned. Bold move. Karen looked momentarily shaken but recovered quickly. The HOA operates independently of county jurisdiction in common areas, she insisted. We have authority. Cynthia nodded solemnly. Of course you do, Karen. You have all the authority you can fit inside that little clipboard. Karen didn't detect the sarcasm. She straightened her shoulders proudly. Thank you, Mayor. Now, if you'll excuse me, I need to finish neutralizing the threat. Sam arrived a few minutes later, panting like he'd run the entire way. He took in the scene, me, disarmed, surrounded by HOA commandos, banana bread held aloft like stolen nuclear codes, and shook his head. Man, he said, I leave you alone for 10 minutes and you start a revolution. I smirked. What can I say? It's a gift. Karen pointed dramatically at Sam. You! Officer! Detain him! Sam's eyes widened in panic. Detain the sheriff? I don't think that's how it works, ma'am. Karen bristled. You think or you know? She demanded. Sam looked at me, pleading silently for backup. I sighed and decided enough was enough. I pulled out my ID, my badge, even my department-issued ID card. Karen, I said slowly, clearly, I am Sheriff Rick Dalton, duly elected by the citizens of this county. You cannot arrest me for walking through my own neighborhood carrying a legally registered sidearm and a loaf of banana bread. Karen stared at the badge, her mouth opening and closing like a goldfish. For one beautiful second, I thought she might actually back down. Then she lifted her chin, scribbled something furiously on her clipboard, and said, Fine. But you're still getting a violation citation for failure to display appropriate HOA-mandated visitor credentials. Expect a fine within 10 business days. And that's how I got written up for illegal walking while armed, with banana bread. Karen wasn't the type to lose a battle and go home quietly. No, losing only fueled her. It was like tossing gasoline on a fire that was already raging in her mind. By Monday morning, she had transformed what should have been a minor neighborhood embarrassment into a full-blown conspiracy theory. According to Karen's latest dispatch on the Maplewood HOA Facebook group, I wasn't just an armed trespasser, I was an imposter. A fraud. A man posing as the sheriff to infiltrate the neighborhood and bring ruin to their carefully curated suburban paradise. It would have been hilarious if it wasn't so predictably insane. The day started innocently enough. I pulled into the sheriff's office parking lot and found Sam hunched over his desk, scrolling through his phone with the horrified fascination usually reserved for car accidents and political debates. You seen this? He asked, spinning the phone toward me. There it was, Karen's post, complete with 3 blurry pictures of me, taken from behind a bush, along with a lengthy caption claiming the real sheriff would never so brazenly disregard HOA authority. Sam snorted. Apparently, you're a deep state plant sent to sabotage Maplewood's way of life. I rubbed my face, already feeling the migraine forming behind my eyes. Fantastic. How deep are we talking? CIA? FBI? HOA Infiltrators Division? Sam only laughed harder, but the situation escalated faster than either of us anticipated. By noon, Karen had organized an emergency HOA meeting titled, "Security Crisis, Identifying Imposters and Protecting Our Community." Flyers appeared on every mailbox like it was the town's most critical event since the 4th of July pie-eating contest. It was mandatory, Karen insisted. Attendance would be taken. Violations would be issued for no-shows. I half expected her to start issuing subpoenas. Out of morbid curiosity and a sense of civic duty, I decided to attend. After all, I was the alleged crisis. Sam tagged along, mostly for the entertainment value. When we arrived at the clubhouse, the scene looked like a poorly staged production of a courtroom drama. Karen had rearranged the chairs into rows facing a makeshift podium constructed from 2 stacked card tables. She stood behind it, dressed in a stiff navy blazer and a name tag that read, "Chief of Security Operations," a title she had absolutely made up that morning. Next to her stood HOA President Mr. Peabody, a nervous-looking man in khakis who seemed deeply uncomfortable with his life choices. Karen tapped the microphone and launched into her opening statement. "Ladies and gentlemen of Maplewood," she began, voice trembling with self-importance. "We are under attack. Not by criminals with ski masks, but by wolves in sheriff's clothing." There was an audible gasp from a few elderly residents. Karen nodded solemnly. "Yesterday's incident was only the beginning. If we do not act decisively, we risk losing our autonomy, our safety, and our pickleball courts." A hand shot up from the second row. It was Mrs. Cranston, sitting in her motorized scooter, her dog in her lap. "What about the pool?" she asked. Karen's face tightened. "Especially the pool," she said darkly, like she was delivering state secrets. What followed was a theatrical presentation only Karen could have orchestrated. She introduced Exhibit A, a blurry photo of me standing near the playground, banana bread box tucked under my arm. "Notice the suspicious package," Karen said, using a laser pointer she had no business owning. The red dot bounced wildly as her hands shook with excitement. "Unidentified. Uninspected. Potentially explosive." Sam nudged me and whispered, "Was it laced with walnuts? Is that the danger?" I bit back a laugh. Karen wasn't done. She played grainy video footage from a clubhouse security camera that showed me waving at a neighbor. "Aggressive hand gestures," she narrated solemnly. "Textbook intimidation tactics." I expected someone to laugh, to call her out, but to my dismay, a handful of residents were nodding along. Fear was contagious, even when it was ridiculous. Karen finished her presentation by demanding a vote to conduct a full investigation into my credentials and authority, which she referred to as Operation Verify and Nullify. She even had laminated badges for her investigators, complete with clip-art magnifying glasses. I hadn't seen dedication like this since my nephew tried to build a time machine out of cardboard boxes and old microwaves. At this point, Mayor Cynthia Lane arrived, strolling casually into the chaos with a large iced coffee and the resigned look of someone who knew she was about to waste an afternoon. She leaned against the back wall, arms crossed, clearly enjoying the free entertainment. Karen spotted her immediately and seized the opportunity to drag the mayor into her scheme. "Mayor Lane," she called dramatically, "in accordance with Maplewood Bylaw 7C subsection D, we request your support in establishing a special tribunal to investigate the alleged sheriff impersonator." Cynthia raised an eyebrow so high it nearly touched her hairline. "A tribunal?" she repeated deadpan. Karen nodded eagerly. "A temporary oversight committee, authorized to question, detain, and if necessary, penalize the suspect." Cynthia took a long, slow sip of her coffee. "Karen, you realize Rick Dalton has been the sheriff for 3 years, right? We literally had an election. You campaigned for his opponent, remember? The guy who promised to lower noise ordinances because you hated the fireworks show." Karen's smile didn't falter. "Exactly. I have motivation to doubt the legitimacy of that election. There could have been external influences. Mail-in ballots. Outside agitators." Sam muttered under his breath. "Next she's gonna demand a recount." Cynthia set down her coffee and sighed. Fine. You want a tribunal? You can have a tribunal. But it'll be public. Transparent. Recorded for posterity. Karen's eyes gleamed. Perfect. Cynthia glanced at me, smirking. Sheriff, you're okay with participating, right? I mean, assuming you have nothing to hide. I tipped my hat. Not a thing, Mayor. I'm an open book. Mostly pictures, but still. The vote passed, of course. It wasn't even close. Fear won over reason like it always did when HOA politics got involved. I was now officially under investigation by the Maplewood Neighborhood Security Tribunal, chaired by none other than Karen Whitmore, Chief of Security Operations, who was treating this like the trial of the century. As we left the clubhouse, Sam shook his head in disbelief. You know what's funny? He said. This might be the first time anyone's been put on trial for banana bread. I chuckled grimly. Let's just hope it's not a capital offense. As I walked to my truck, I couldn't help but notice Karen's eyes following me from the window of the clubhouse, narrowed in suspicion, clipboard hugged tight to her chest like a shield. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. Karen was just getting started, and somewhere deep inside, I had a sinking feeling she was about to drag this absurd neighborhood feud into even crazier territory. And unfortunately for me, she was just crazy enough to win a few battles before this war was over. The thing about Karen was that she didn't sleep when there was a mission at hand. Normal people, after hosting a ridiculous tribunal and failing to prove the sheriff was an imposter, would maybe take a day off to reflect on their life choices. Not Karen. She doubled down. By Tuesday evening, Sam and I were sitting in the station watching old westerns when the first sign of her next move arrived. An anonymous tip came into dispatch, reporting suspicious activity involving county officials and contraband being hidden within HOA boundaries. Sam almost choked on his sandwich when he heard the description of the suspects. Male, mid-40s, ruggedly handsome, possible mustache. He looked at me and deadpanned. Clearly you. Mustache is a dead giveaway. At first, I ignored it. I had real work to do and no patience for Karen's backyard espionage fantasies. But around 10 p.m., curiosity got the better of me. I decided to swing by my place, mostly to check if she had planted cameras in my bushes or drones overhead. I figured maybe she would be lurking behind a tree with night vision goggles. I underestimated her. I found her in full camouflage gear, crawling military-style across my backyard with a crew of equally committed neighbors, all armed with flashlights, walkie-talkies, and in one case, a fishing net. I leaned against the fence and just watched for a minute, absorbing the absurdity of it all. It was like watching raccoons break into a garbage can, if raccoons were middle-aged and fueled by rage and Diet Coke. Karen gave a series of intricate hand signals to her team, who proceeded to take cover behind my rose bushes and pool furniture. Her target, clearly, was the black lockbox I kept inside the small utility shed near my garage. She had decided it was the source of my alleged criminal activity. Maybe she thought it held state secrets. Maybe she thought it was full of gold bars. The truth, which she would discover later to her profound disappointment, was far less exciting. But in that moment, in Karen's mind, she was on a covert operation straight out of a Tom Clancy novel. Sam had followed me home and was now standing beside me, holding his phone up, recording the whole thing. You're gonna want to see this later, he said, barely holding back his laughter. We watched as Karen belly crawled up to the shed door, pulled a bobby pin from her hair, and began trying to pick the lock with all the determination of a seasoned burglar. After several minutes of absolute failure, she signaled to one of her accomplices, a guy wearing night vision goggles over his regular glasses, to bring the bolt cutters. Subtlety was clearly not the strong suit of this operation. I figured it was time to intervene before they either broke my shed or injured themselves. I stepped forward, flipping on the porch light, bathing the backyard in harsh yellow illumination. Karen froze mid-snip, bolt cutters in hand, caught like a raccoon in the spotlight. Her crew scattered instinctively, hiding behind the grill, the swing set, even diving into the pool with a giant splash. Karen, to her credit, didn't run. She dropped the bolt cutters and stood up, brushing dirt off her knees with as much dignity as a woman in camel pants could muster. "Evening, Karen," I said, voice pleasant. "Late night stroll?" She squared her shoulders. "We have reason to believe you are hiding unauthorized contraband within HOA jurisdiction," she announced, as if she had a search warrant signed by the president himself. "And based on what evidence?" I asked, crossing my arms. "Anonymous tips," she said proudly. "Multiple sources." Sam snorted beside me. "Karen, you emailed those tips yourself. You CC'd half the neighborhood by accident." Karen's jaw tightened, but she wasn't backing down. "Regardless," she said, "I am authorized under emergency HOA protocols to conduct an inspection." I laughed out loud at that. "Karen, emergency protocols don't give you the right to break into private property with bolt cutters." She opened her mouth, probably to argue that HOA law superseded everything from county codes to the Constitution, when a loud metallic clang interrupted us. Everyone turned to see Mr. Peabody, the HOA president, standing near the side fence looking guilty as sin. At his feet lay a duffel bag that had clearly been dropped when he tried to climb over the fence. Karen's eyes narrowed. "Mr. Peabody, what are you doing?" she asked suspiciously. Mr. Peabody stammered something about checking on things and security patrols, but he was sweating bullets. I frowned. Something wasn't right. Moving toward the bag, I flipped it open and found bundles of cash wrapped in rubber bands, along with several forged invoices for landscaping services that had never actually been performed. I whistled low. "Well, well, well," I said. "Looks like we found a real crime after all." Karen's mouth dropped open in shock. This wasn't part of her fantasy. This wasn't what she had prepared for. She had spent so much energy trying to catch me with banana bread that she had overlooked the fact that her own HOA president had been embezzling from the neighborhood funds for months. Peabody made a break for it, sprinting toward the street like a man half his age. Karen, to her eternal credit, didn't hesitate. She charged after him, rallying her golf cart militia with a shrill blast from her whistle. The resulting chase was something that would live in Maplewood legend forever. A golf cart speeding after a 60-year-old man in cargo shorts, lawn chairs and garden gnomes flying in all directions as they tore across yards. Sam and I hopped in my truck and cut Peabody off at the next intersection. I cuffed him easily, reading him his rights while Karen pulled up behind us, triumphant in her slightly smoking golf cart. She climbed out, hands on her hips, and grinned like she had personally taken down Al Capone. "Justice," she said simply. I couldn't even argue with her. For once, her insanity had actually led to something useful. Back at the station, as we processed Peabody and began untangling the mess of fraud and theft he had left behind, I found myself shaking my head in disbelief. Karen had accidentally stumbled onto a legitimate crime ring in her quest to take me down. It was almost impressive in a way. Misguided, reckless, infuriating, but impressive. Later that night, as I sat on my porch watching the stars and savoring the rare peace, Sam dropped by with a six-pack. He clinked a bottle against mine and said, "To Karen. May her insanity always work in our favor." I laughed. "And may she never find out how close she actually came to being right about something." We sat there in comfortable silence, knowing deep down that tonight was just a temporary pause. Karen was already plotting her next move. And if I knew anything about her, the next chapter would be even crazier than the last. If I thought catching a criminal red-handed would satisfy Karen and put an end to the HOA madness, I was sorely mistaken. In her mind, the arrest of Mr. Peabody was not a conclusion but a justification, a confirmation that her instincts had been right all along, and if anything, a call to arms for even stricter neighborhood enforcement. By Wednesday morning, she had posted triumphant announcements all over the Maplewood Community app, declaring the neighborhood safe once again thanks to her brave leadership and bold investigative work. What she failed to mention was that the criminal had been standing 3 feet away from her at every HOA meeting for the past year, while she wasted her energy chasing banana bread conspiracies. Word spread fast about the incident, and by Thursday, Mayor Cynthia Lane decided that it would only be appropriate to hold a public forum at the community center to clear the air and restore a sense of normalcy. Of course, Karen interpreted this as her grand moment of recognition. She immediately demanded that the event include an official, Karen court, session, complete with opening statements, evidence review, and most importantly, the final resolution of the charges she had tried to bring against me. It would have been laughable if Cynthia had not, for her own entertainment, agreed to it. The community center was packed to the walls when I arrived, carrying the infamous black lockbox under my arm. I could feel every eye in the room tracking it like a hawk watches a mouse. Karen, dressed in a navy blue blazer that seemed one size too small and wearing a fresh name tag identifying her as Chief Justice of Maplewood Tribunal, was already at the podium. Her smile was stretched so tight it looked painful. She banged a gavel someone had clearly bought off Amazon that morning and called the meeting to order with the gravity of a Supreme Court justice overseeing the trial of the century. I stood beside Cynthia, who looked half amused and half ready to flee the moment things turned ugly. Sam sat near the back, phone in hand, probably already planning the highlight reel he would upload later. Karen launched into a long, rambling opening statement filled with phrases like community integrity, the sacred trust of property values, and the thin beige line between order and chaos. She referenced bylaws, sub-bylaws, even bylaws about bylaws. Somewhere around minute 20, Cynthia leaned over and whispered, "If this goes on much longer, I might declare martial law just to end it." Finally, mercifully, Karen reached the point everyone was waiting for. She turned dramatically toward me and pointed a shaking finger. "Sheriff Rick Dalton, you stand accused of unauthorized open carry on private HOA property, failure to display appropriate visitor credentials, and the uninspected transport of a suspicious package across communal grounds. How do you plead?" I met her gaze calmly and said, "Not guilty. Very, very not guilty." Gasps rippled through the room like I had just confessed to robbing the community bake sale. Karen beamed, sensing victory, and announced that the time had come to reveal the contents of the suspicious package. She invited me to place the lockbox on the table in front of the audience. I obliged, setting it down with a dramatic clunk that made several people jump. I could see Karen practically vibrating with anticipation. She was ready to see guns, cash, illegal fireworks, anything she could twist into a scandal that would validate her crusade. I undid the latches slowly, letting the tension build. The room was so quiet I could hear someone coughing in the parking lot outside. I opened the lid and stepped back, letting everyone get a clear look. Inside, neatly packed, was a loaf of slightly squished banana bread wrapped in foil, a thermos of coffee, and a manila envelope filled with the day's paperwork from the sheriff's office. That was it. No guns, no explosives, no secret documents. Just baked goods and bureaucracy. The silence stretched until Karen, face rapidly flushing from pink to crimson, stepped forward and rifled through the box in disbelief. She unwrapped the foil, sniffed the banana bread suspiciously, and even poked it with a pen as if expecting it to explode. When nothing happened, she turned slowly to face the crowd, who by now were either chuckling or openly laughing. I could see Mrs. Cranston wiping tears from her eyes, struggling to catch her breath. Karen's voice wavered. "There could still be something hidden inside," she stammered. Cynthia stepped forward, plucked off a corner of the banana bread, and popped it into her mouth. She chewed thoughtfully, swallowed, and said, "Tastes like banana and walnuts. No felony detected." The room erupted into laughter so loud it shook the cheap metal folding chairs. Sam leaned back in his seat, clapping slowly with the widest grin I had ever seen. Karen, realizing she had lost every shred of credibility she had ever built, tried to salvage the moment. "Regardless," she said, clipboard clutched tightly, "Sheriff Dalton still failed to display proper HOA visitor credentials, and that is a serious violation." Cynthia rolled her eyes and pulled a certificate out of a folder. "By the power vested in me by common sense and a severe lack of patience, I hereby issue Sheriff Dalton an honorary Maplewood resident pass. No expiration date, no badge inspections, no banana bread embargoes." She handed me the laminated pass with a wink. Karen, visibly shaking, muttered something about filing an appeal with the state. I smiled, tipped my hat to the crowd, and said, "Pleasure doing lawful business with you, Maplewood." Sam whooped from the back and shouted, "Banana bread for everybody!" The meeting ended with a massive impromptu barbecue in the park, with families setting up tables, kids running wild, and laughter filling the air. Someone even put up a sign that read, "Banana Bread Day, in honor of Sheriff Dalton's exoneration." In the spirit of goodwill, I decided to return the favor to Karen. During the barbecue, I called everyone over to make a small presentation. With great ceremony, I awarded Karen a shiny new badge that read, "Neighborhood Nuisance Officer, Honorary Deputy of Overreaction." The crowd roared with laughter, and even Cynthia had to turn away to hide her smile. Karen accepted the badge stiffly, but I noticed she pinned it to her blazer before the night was over. Some part of her, deep down, loved the attention, even if it came with a side order of public mockery. As the sun set and the sky turned a soft purple, I leaned back in my chair, sipping sweet tea and watching kids smear ketchup all over their faces. For now, peace had returned to Maplewood. Karen was already huddled with a few diehards, plotting new neighborhood regulations about acceptable barbecue grill heights or patriotic flag display angles, but I wasn't worried. Whatever craziness came next, I was ready for it. After all, this was my town. My neighborhood. And no clipboard-wielding vigilante, no matter how persistent, was going to scare me away. Besides, if things ever got too wild, I knew exactly what to do. Bake another loaf of banana bread, slap a badge on it, and let Karen chase her tail all over again. The war was over. For now. But the next battle, I was sure, was already baking in someone's oven.